Hi, this is my review of Victoriana 3rd edition. Victoriana is, well, it's a bit hard for me to define what Victoriana is as a role playing game, but I guess you could describe it as dark fantasy steampunk role playing game. Now, let's talk about the quality of the PDF. The PDF is pretty good. It has some excellent illustrations, and the overall graphic design of the document is pretty good. And there is a good organization. However, there are some things that I could consider it could have been better. First of all, the organization. This is just a specific part of the book. The organization in general is pretty good, but when it comes to character creation, it's kind of like those sections that you read about all the different things you can use to create a character, your backgrounds, your skills, etc. But you have to go back and forth from between the pages because some things are pretty scattered throughout the entire section, and that could have been better. It could have been a sort of like a well-organized step-by-step guide, but here you have to go from one page to another, picking and choosing anything that you want to include in your character background and skills and all that stuff. And the other negative thing is that there are some rule ambiguities, just very few ones. I think there were one or two. I'll get more into that when I talk about the gameplay. And well, let's talk about the contents of the PDF. First, they give you a really good introduction to what Victoriana is. A fantastical world of sorcery and steam. And well, you just need paper and pencils, the standard stuff, but also you need a bunch of six-sided dice. Preferably if you have two different colors, let's say white dice and black dice, because white dice are going to be the dice you will use to carry out different skill checks and all that stuff. And black dice will represent the difficulty of different tasks. So it's a lot better if you have two different colors, so you can roll all the dice at the same time and you get your result. Now they give you a lot of content when it comes to the campaign setting. This is a pseudo historical background because, well, if you can tell from fiction, the fiction out of the fact, you're going to learn a lot about the society, religion, and historical outlook of the 19th century. But there are a lot of fantastical elements. Maybe some people won't be too comfortable with them because I think Victoriana could have worked without those fantasy elements, but I understand why they did it because a lot of people are just in love with fantasy. So if they just toss in some elves and dwarves and gnomes, they're going to love the setting almost immediately. And here you get a lot of that stuff. You have humans living in society with elves and with ogres, beastmen, and it's pretty normal. I also think there's something a bit weird because they take some historical concepts and they give them their own fantastical fictional twist. But when it comes to religion, they kind of mix and match things. So for example, you have organizations that are pretty much references or tributes to different real world religions, and also some organizations related to conspiracy theory and all that. But at the same time, they use some real elements. For example, they use real archangel names. And I think some players that are too sensitive with those subjects could feel a bit uncomfortable if they play using those real names. So that's a thing to consider. And well, they also give you a pretty good outlook about the differences between classes, upper class, middle class, lower class, etiquette and fashion, and vice. And with this campaign setting, they do handle or treat the different racial and misogynistic features of the 19th century. However, they downplay these characteristics of the age, so different people, different kinds of players don't feel excluded from the setting. but there is still there, but it feels more like a hint. So I think that depends. It depends on your gaming group. If you want to I don't know, play it a bit stronger, if you want the authentic Victorian era feel, because a lot of people actually have fun playing with these stereotypes. So for example, I've had female players who like to create very chauvinistic male characters, and they have a lot of fun playing the ridiculous role of the chauvinist, etc. And well, now let's talk about the character creation process. I think this is the crunchiest and more complex part of the PDF, because you have more than just backgrounds and skills and different cosmetic details. You also have to take into account vocations, breeding, childhood experience, and that's plays a huge part in the mechanics, because for example, your character may belong to the upper class, and that character could have an easier time by having intellectual or social characteristics on a higher tier. And if you play a character that belongs to a lower class, maybe you're a lot more physically oriented and you don't have certain benefits that the upper class has. But because you have different members from different classes in your party, you're going to combine those talents to achieve success. And there's some stereotypes to each class. For example, the upper class could be composed of dilettantes and maybe artists, and the middle class usually has to do with I don't know, scientists and some craftsmen, and the lower class is kind of like the class of the odd jobs and the working class. So it's actually pretty interesting to play around with these stereotypes and maybe achieve a sort of archetypical character and breaking the mold in some things. And well, now let's talk about the gameplay itself. Gameplay in Victoriana is actually quite simple. You just grab a specific attribute and the skill. So for example, maybe you want to perform some kind of acrobatic maneuver, and you just add your dexterity and your acrobatics or athletic skill, and you make a roll, and that's your dice pool. And if you get 1 or 6, that counts as one success. But 6 is actually better because the dice explodes. That is, you can keep on rolling. However, this is the ambiguous part of the rules. They don't tell you if the dice perpetually explode. That is, if you roll a 6 and then roll a 6 again, can you keep on rolling, or does it stop right there? They never explain that. So I guess that depends on your group. You could make a sort of house rule. If you wanted more pulpy, you should allow for perpetual explosion, but if not, just let it explode once or twice. And well, with each task there comes a difficulty. So, and that difficulty is represented by black dice. So you roll 6-sided dice, and for each 1 and 6 that you get, that counts as a success, as an elimination of success when you roll the normal dice. So let's say you made your normal roll and you had I don't know, 4 or 5 successes, and the difficulty resulted in 3 successful black dice. You only have 2 successes at the end. So it's actually simple, but at the same time it could turn into a dice fest, because for example, if you have very high attributes and skills and you face a very difficult challenge, you're going to roll a bunch of 6-sided dice, and that could be a bit I don't know, clunky. And when it comes to combat, it's actually pretty cool because, well, you have a lot of options. Almost anything that you can think of, grappling, which is handled pretty streamlined in my opinion, and that's good because grappling is also usually very complex in some games. But you can also perform things that are very, I don't know, typical or exclusive of the setting. So for example, you could slap a cat, as in, you know, like, I challenge you to a duel, and you slap your enemy, and that will impose a penalty on that enemy's next action. That's pretty cool. and it's actually pretty easy to die in this game if you're not careful. You unless you resort to some sort of magical healing, you're going to end up wounded and have a bit of a hard time recovering. Oh, I forgot to mention something very very cool. I was going to save it for later, but in this game it's very common to have all sorts of mechanical limbs. If you lose an arm or a leg, maybe even during character creation, you may choose this option. You may choose to use a mechanical arm, even with hidden gadgets inside, or a leg. Everything is steam powered, and that's pretty amazing. That not only gives you a lot of chance for role playing opportunities, but it also has an impact during adventuring and combat. Now, in this setting, there is magic, there is sorcery. However, it feels like a very subtle force. It's there and it's moving things in the world, and it presents a very powerful plot element. However, it's the setting feels more like industry and science is kind of moving magic away and taking its place, but so it feels like a very behind the curtains force. And sorcery here is based on many historical currents of sorcery and mentalism. So, for example, you have clairvoyance, spiritualism, you'll have a ceremonial magic and sigil inscription, demonology, necromancy. And necromancy is actually pretty cool in this game, but it's usually reserved for the enemies because it's like a very dangerous and very evil act. But I know a lot of players are going to choose their characters to take necromancy as a magical discipline. And you have relics, which are basically kind of like artifacts or magical items. And you have a lot of information to create your own steam-powered devices, all sorts of cool gadgets, such as those goggles, and you can even create goggles that can see magical energies and invisible things. You also have a bunch of clockwork limbs and modifications and attachments. You can create all sorts of crazy things with this book. And the last chapter is pretty good because it gives you a lot of advice on how to run the game, on how to establish a good atmosphere and theme. And you also get a very good selection of NPCs and monsters. And you have all the information to create your own monsters as well and NPCs. Now, when it comes to the bestiary, I feel like the undead have like the spotlight. They feel really powerful, moody, Machiavellic. And they feel like the staple or like like a very powerful presence in the world of Victoriana. Well, let me tell you what I think about this RPG. I think the theme and the mood is excellent. I haven't played too many games that take place in the Victorian era, but I think this is the best one when it comes to establishing that feel of industry and sorcery just hidden behind the veil of reality, and I don't know, and those conventions and elements and artistic flourishes that come with the 19th century. So the theme is very strong. Some players will find it pretty hard when they try to create their ideal character because of what I was telling you, that you have to go back and forth between the pages. And some others will find that part of the rules a bit ambiguous about the exploding dice. And I think there was some other thing, I can't remember it at the moment, but nothing that's game breaking. And you have a lot of optional rules, so you can carry out actions and combat as simple or as complex as you want. So if you like a Victorian setting in your games, I highly recommend this game. And if you like steampunk, of course, and if you like horror, because there are a lot of opportunities to turn this into a horror game, I think that's what makes Victoriana so powerful from a perspective that a lot of players will feel attracted to it because it handles so many subgenres at the same time. You have steampunk, you have dark fantasy, you have normal fantasy if you want to play it like that. Yeah, and its pseudo historical setting actually has an educational value. If you can take away the fiction and see written between the lines, you're going to see a very accurate description of maybe even I don't know, a critique of how history and industry developed. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.